The slow part of the offseason is officially over, which means it's time to start really honing in on our finalized 2025 fantasy football rankings. And that's what we're going to do today by going through the top 30 wide receiver rankings. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, the first thing that I want to announce here is obviously you may have noticed there has been a brand change to Football Fanalysts Network. We are no longer Football Fanalysts Network over here. We are Fantasy Football Roundup. You can see the new logo, you can see the new banner, and I can't tell you how important the next couple weeks are going to be here, because this is essentially going to be a time frame where not only are we changing the name, I'm bringing you something that I have never brought you before, and it's really never been brought to you in the fantasy football community. It is going to be enormous. I'm not going to unveil what it is just yet because we're still developing it right now, but I've been developing it all off season, and you're going to need to stay tuned for exactly what's coming. So just some quick notes really quick. No, the content's not changing. I am still putting out all fantasy football content all the time. It's all stuff that you want to see from me. Nothing will change from content. And also, this is just a rebrand of Football Fanalysts Network. I have not been bought off by a different company, so that means that nothing in my messaging will be controlled by anybody else. I am still controlling the message here. Again, more is going to come out about this big brand change right here. There's a lot more to come, I'm telling you guys this right now. But I wanted to be brief today, just if you were interested in the brand change. Right now, I will leave Football Fanalysts Network sign up just so people are familiar that it is still me and it is just a brand change. Again, I am not being bought by a corporation or anything, any other company, which means I'm still in control of my message. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into the top 30 rankings. Starting out with our first tier right here, it's going to be the exact same two. Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Now, with these two guys right here, I think that the reason they're in the tier by themselves is because I truly believe that these are the only two wide receivers that I can see having top number one wide receiver upside this year. Ja'Marr Chase for the obvious reasons, right? He did it last year, and I've been saying this for a while. It's not that I think that he's going to repeat. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think Ja'Marr Chase still has the best shot to do it, though. He's still got the greater quarterback than CeeDee Lamb. He's still the better overall player, I would say, than CeeDee Lamb when he is fully healthy. Ja'Marr Chase is just so explosive. The offense looks the exact same, and the ceiling is really the exact same because he's at the prime of his career. And then with CeeDee Lamb right here, listen, none of that was to slight CeeDee Lamb. I love CeeDee Lamb. I think I'm higher on him than most of the creators are and most everybody in the community is, because everybody wants to put Justin Jefferson right here until now because of that injury. I've had CD here the whole offseason. I think CD's great. The only concern I have is not because of Dak and his inability to provide the upside. Dak can and has produced top number one wide receiver upside for CeeDee Lamb in his career. The problem that I've had all offseason with this is Brian Schottenheimer coming in as head coach. I think this guy's over his head. And I've been saying this for a while. Look at what he was saying about Dak earlier in the offseason. He was saying, yeah, I kind of think he's in this developmental period. They're trying to screw with like how he throws and like what he's doing. It's like the guy's in his 30s. He doesn't need that crap. So I think that could, potentially screw things up. But I still think CeeDee Lamb is going to dominate the target share. He's still an elite player. I think CeeDee Lamb still has a shot to be the number one. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Puka Nacua still at 3, who I've been holding strong all offseason on. And I actually move Amon-Ra St. Brown over Justin Jefferson. Now, I'll get into that in a minute. But with Puka Nacua, I've been holding strong on this one for a while. With Puka, I love this offense with Matt Stafford. Now, the only concern with this one all of a sudden is that Matt Stafford is currently not practicing in training camp. He's got back soreness, and the guy is like almost 40 years old. So there is potential for this one to crash and burn. But Puka Nacua also is a guy who is, when he is out there, scoring 16-plus fantasy points per game. And yes, Davante Adams comes in, changes a little bit of the dynamic here. But if anything, I think it just helps Puka Nacua get open on a more consistent basis. Because towards the end of last season, when it was him and Cooper Kupp, everybody knew Cooper Kupp couldn't move like he used to, so Puka Nacua took the majority of the lion's share of the defensive focus on a weekly basis. I don't think that's going to be as much of a problem with Davante Adams increasing his ceiling. Amon-Ra St. Brown over Justin Jefferson now. Now, with Justin Jefferson, obviously, if you have not heard, Justin Jefferson is sitting out training camp right now, and the reports are that he might sit out, like, actually the majority of it. because of a mild, I think it was hamstring or groin pull. Listen, it's not that I think Justin Jefferson is a bad player. People need to understand this. I have had Justin Jefferson ranked below consensus all offseason for the J.J. McCarthy factor. I don't personally believe J.J. McCarthy is going to be that guy. I think he's going to be fine, but when you're talking about Kevin O'Connell's offense and how much they want to throw the ball, I don't think it's possible for Justin Jefferson to have number one wide receiver upside this year. He did not throw more than 20 to 25 times, many times in college. So with Justin Jefferson, all the weapons that they have, not saying he won't dominate target share, but now you add on this injury here, and this is a player who, if he comes out in week 1 and does it again, we could be looking at major issues here. I felt more comfortable putting Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4 because with Amon-Ra St. Brown, this is a guy who we know is going to be a top 5 wide receiver. End of story. I mean, this is a guy who is also going to be one of the main 3 targets, and I've been saying it for a lot this offseason, that I think it goes back to the big 3 in Detroit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta. And it's not because Jameson Williams isn't good. It's not because Dave Montgomery hasn't been good. I don't think Montgomery will be as good, number one, and J-Mo will be as effective because it is so hard for an offensive coordinator to utilize all that talent to the utmost of their potential like Ben Johnson did. He's just not Ben Johnson, Brian Morton. So I just struggle to see all those other guys getting the targets that they need to be successful. I think it's going to be really honed in on Amon-Ra St. Brown in the passing game, and I think he's a top 5 guy, easy. Malik Neighbors at 6, Nico Collins at 7 to round out this tier right here. Now, with Malik Neighbors, obviously there's been an anti-Neighbors crusade over the last several weeks in fantasy football, and it's been interesting to watch. Listen, the quarterback position is obviously not ideal. Russell Wilson is not an ideal quarterback. Jackson Dart doesn't look great so far. He's a rookie, so give him time, I guess. But with Malik Neighbors here, we're just looking at an ultra talent. Like, that's really what it comes down to. He has Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level talent. We just don't know it yet in fantasy because he doesn't have the quarterback. But that does not mean that he can't be top 10 with Russell Wilson throwing an occasional deep moon ball that gets Malik Neighbors twice or 3 times in a game, which can happen, by the way, because Malik Neighbors is that good. And then with Nico Collins at 7, I think that this is a guy who I just have trouble putting much higher than this from a fantasy finish perspective. Now, when Nico Collins is out there, Nico Collins will be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. Points per game, he's going to be a top 5 guy. But the problem we've seen with Nico in both of his really good years is injury presence. He's been injured these last 2 seasons. And it's hard to envision him playing a full 17-game stretch with that much workload. I'm not saying that Nico is going to be challenged by anybody in Houston, but I am saying that Nico is at an uphill climb for me personally to be ranked much higher than this right here because I just don't know if I can see him playing a full 17-game season. But again, make no mistake, when Nico's out there, he will be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Brian Thomas Jr. at 8 and Drake London at 9. Now, with Brian Thomas Jr., I've had mixed reviews on this one, and I think it's because I give him his dues. Like, Brian Thomas Jr. is elite. He's an elite prospect at wide receiver. He's an elite athlete. He's just an elite player. We saw elite greatness from him last year. I've got a couple problems with him, though. Number one, I've been saying this all offseason, and I'm curious to hear what the response will be right now because it's been a while since I brought this up. Travis Hunter will get targets. Like, are we clear on that? Travis Hunter, the Jacksonville Jaguars traded up from the 5 spot in the draft to the 2 spot. They gave up a future first rounder. You know who you don't do that for? A cornerback. You don't do that for a cornerback. So I'm not debating whether or not he will get snaps at corner. Of course he will get snaps at cornerback. But if you think that they drafted him to primarily be a corner instead of a wide receiver, you're wrong. And when push comes to shove in the NFL, and he can't play 2 ways all the time, he will be primarily used as a wide receiver. So Brian Thomas Jr.'s ceiling is lower because of that. Because of the fact that he will not get as many targets as he probably did last year. And when you add on top of the fact that Trevor Lawrence just isn't that great of a quarterback, I don't see him supporting 2 top 20, top 15 options. So Brian Thomas Jr., I don't see being a top 3 guy this year. So that's why I've got him in tier 3 instead of in tier 2. And with Drake London here, I think Drake London's a really good pick in fantasy this year. I think that Michael Penix will be an upgrade over Kirk Cousins. And I've said that a bunch. And I don't think people really disagree with me on that either. Kirk Cousins was finished last year. And Michael Penix just did not get the time to really develop properly during the last couple of games of the year. It's kind of a wash. I think Penix is a greater talent. I think he's got a better arm overall than Kirk Cousins. And I think that with a full offseason prepping as the starter, Drake London is in good shape. And we saw him prove it last year that he is a great fantasy wide receiver. I expect the same thing again. A.J. Brown at 10, Jackson Smith-Njigba at 11. Now, with A.J. Brown, I did have to make a business decision on this one. At the beginning of the offseason, I was not as big on A.J. Brown. I did discuss how I would not be drafting him. I actually said he was one of the worst picks in fantasy. I don't particularly feel that way anymore, and I'll tell you why. Because I did research, and it led me to believe that Saquon Barkley is not going to get the amount of touches he did last year. And I do fully believe that. So what happens in that case, right? Philadelphia is going to throw the ball more. That will happen. And what happens when that happens? Well, A.J. Brown is going to get a bunch more targets. Because the problem that we saw last year was A.J. Brown lost 2 targets per game when he was out there in 2024 from 2023. I believe he gets at least a target a game back. So with A.J. Brown, even with his absence last year, he finished as a top 20 wide receiver in half PPR because his fantasy points per game were still really strong. This guy still has the talent. I'm not banking on a recession this year from a talent standpoint. I do believe that it will increase his target share as well in Philadelphia, so I believe he's a top 10 guy. And then with Jackson Smith-Njigba, it's actually just really weird. I find myself in this position where I look at his price on Underdog, and I see that he's ranked as a wide receiver 17, 18, 19 range, and I really just don't understand it. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be a really safe bet. He's really one of the only bust-proof players, in my opinion, this year. Because it's not because that Sam Darnold is some great quarterback, right? Sam Darnold is not the greatest quarterback. But the good thing about Jackson Smith-Njigba is that it's basically him and nobody else. Cooper Kupp, at 32 years old, is his other counterpoint at the wide receiver position. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling, probably not him, probably Torrey Horton as his wide receiver 3. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to hog targets this year. So even if Sam Darnold isn't fantastic at pushing the ball down the field, for example, well, Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to eat up a lot of points, particularly in a full PPR format. So with Jackson Smith-Njigba, I just see him as a top 12 guy again this year. And I'm willing to draft him an Underdog a bunch because of his price. And then Ladd McConkey at 12 to round out this tier. Ladd McConkey, it is what it is. Honestly, this is how I feel. It's basically around the same area that every fantasy platform has it at. Whether you're on Underdog, ESPN, or Yahoo, for example, Ladd McConkey is typically going to be ranked in this range. I just wish that the Chargers would throw the ball more because I think that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor on how much more Ladd gets target-wise. Towards the end of the season, Ladd McConkey did become more important and more efficient, by the way, on all of his touches. But I just don't know if I see Ladd McConkey getting 160, 150 targets. I think 140, maybe in that range, which is going to lead him to be a really good wide receiver because I also believe that he will get in the end zone because he's a very talented athlete as well, which is why I'm good with him in the top 12. But I don't know if we're drafting him towards the ceiling or just a little under it. That's why I'm not as big on Ladd in fantasy drafts, but I do think he's a top 12 guy. Dropping down to our next tier right here. I also had to make another business decision and put T. Higgins at 13 and Marvin Harrison Jr. at 14. Now, the big thing that's been kind of affecting some of these rankings for me is that Rashee Rice had to drop. Obviously, he is impending a suspension right now, so we're waiting to hear what the news is going to be. With T. Higgins, the reason I ultimately decided to put him up here, after a lot of this offseason kind of dogging him for not being a great pick in fantasy drafts, is because when you look at the fantasy points per game, it's elite. This is a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy points per game in 2024. And I do believe that if you kind of stat that out to a full 17-game season, he's going to be a top 10 guy. Now, obviously, he's never finished as a top 15 wide receiver. So I feel like I'm putting him right at his ceiling right here because you also have to factor in injuries with T. Higgins. That's the problem here. So with T. Higgins, I don't think it's particularly likely that Cincinnati has two top 15 wide receivers. But I also think that T. Higgins, just from a ceiling perspective, I have to rank him a little bit higher. But make no mistake about this one. T. Higgins, I am kind of ranking him at his ceiling. And I feel the same about Marvin. It's actually a little bit different because I think Marvin does have a greater ceiling. I think Marvin can finish anywhere from top 10 to top 30. Like, honestly, I think Marvin's range of outcomes is so crazy this year, and it's led me to not really feeling like I can draft him that much. Unless I'm getting Marvin as my wide receiver 2, or even better, my wide receiver 3, I'm not comfortable having him as my wide receiver 1. This offense looks the same. Like everything that I've been seeing coming out of training camp, it's go routes. It's go routes. There's a couple out routes. It's so much like it looked like last year. And obviously you can't take much away from this early in training camp. But all I'm saying is that from a play calling perspective, it looks a lot similar to what we saw last year from Marvin. I think that Marvin will take the leap as an athlete, but I don't know if I could see Marvin getting much more of an advanced route tree as opposed to what he had in 2024, and that scares me. That's why I've got to put him kind of in the middle of where I think his range of outcomes is. I've got him here at 14. And then I've got Rashee Rice also in this tier to round us out at 15. Now with Rashee Rice here, this is a particular spot with Rashee Rice that I think I'm comfortable with taking him as my wide receiver 15 in underdog drafts particularly, and even in redraft leagues. If he's a wide receiver 16, wide receiver 17, I'm going to take him. And I'll tell you the reason why, and I've discussed this a bunch. First of all, we know Rashee Rice on the field is a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. Like, it has literally been proven from the back half of his rookie year to the first couple games of 2024. This is an elite breakout wide receiver impending. Obviously, lots of other issues here. And the main one that everyone's talking about right now is how many games will he be suspended? And I've gone over this a bunch. I know I could be wrong, but I truly believe after looking at the history of what NFL has done with vehicular incidents, I'm expecting a 3 to 4 game suspension. Now, he may end up getting a 6-game suspension dropped down on him, but after the appeals, I think it gets dropped to 4. Now, again, if I'm wrong, then I'm going to be wrong and we'll adjust accordingly. But when it comes to taking a shot on a player like this, you have to know this is a top 5 upside type of guy. So when I look at his price dropping as we speak on Underdog at the back of the 4th round right now, I'm going to take the dude. And if you do want to take him, you're going to get the upside. So just go down there in the comments. There's a link there to go to Underdog, and you can use code FFN to sign up and go into a draft and take Rashee Rice at this crazy discount you're getting him at right now. Because I'm telling you, the upside is great. And this is how I won $19,000 playing Underdog last year, by taking shots on guys like that at great discounts in these types of drafts. Because here's the reality of this. When Rashee Rice comes back and plays in 2025, he's going to be a great player. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got Terry McLaurin at 16 and Garrett Wilson at 17. And I'll be honest here, I don't like taking either of these guys in my fantasy drafts. I think that Terry McLaurin is in a really, really tough spot for me because I love the quarterback. Jaden Daniels obviously is great. I don't fear a particularly huge sophomore slump coming down for Jaden Daniels. But my problem with Terry is that, number one, he's at an age I don't love. He's getting close to 30 right now. And number two, he's dealing with a contract issue. Now, he did report to camp as of the time of this filming, which is definitely a good sign. But the problem with Terry from a numbers perspective last year is that the majority of his fantasy success was carried by touchdowns. It's just an inarguable fact. So if we know anything about fantasy football, it's that 2 stats in particular are not sticky stats: yards per reception and touchdowns. So when you factor in that touchdown metric here, I can't see a world where it doesn't drop. I don't think he turned into Mike Evans overnight, and he's going to be consistently a 10 wide receiver, 10 touchdown wide receiver for the rest of his career. I just see him dropping. And then with Garrett Wilson at 17, it's just a quarterback issue again. That's really been the story of his entire NFL career, hasn't it? I mean, Justin Fields obviously suffered an injury last week, which was a huge sigh of relief when we got the word that it was just a dislocated toe. I'm sure it hurt like heck, but it's not going to be impeding his start to the season. So he's going to have his quarterback one, who he also played with in college. So theoretically, the chemistry should be there. But the problem is that everybody knows Justin Fields is not a great thrower of the football. There's a reason Vegas doesn't project him to get more than 3,500 passing yards. It's just a crazy bet to me to take Garrett Wilson much higher than this because of the fact that if you look at DJ Moore in 2023 with Justin Fields, it's like, yeah, the majority of his production came from touchdowns and big yards per reception. Again, harder to predict those numbers. Garrett Wilson's been low on touchdowns since his entire career because of bad quarterback play. I'm kind of expecting the same in 2025, but I still love the talent, and I think he'll get the job done enough to be a solid wide receiver too. And then Jalen Waddle at 18. I also have been big on Jalen Waddle throughout the entire offseason. If you've been following me, this should not come as a surprise that I've got Jalen Waddle here at 18, and you have not seen Tyreek Hill. And you won't, by the way. I don't have him as a top 30. I am out on Tyreek Hill. And by the way, looks like Tua might be out on him as well, saying that, yeah, our relationship is a work in progress. You can't just say what you said last season and then just come back and be like, hey, bro, my bad. Are we good? Like, obviously, that's not flying in Miami right now. And I also discussed this. Tyreek Hill's just at that age, and there's a lot of indicating measures that will indicate to you that he's not going to return as a top 12 guy. That opens up the door in a big way for Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, I've been talking about all offseason. He's one of my most drafted players. I think his price right now is excellent. The upside is through the roof. And I'm not joking. If Tyreek Hill is not the same player he used to be, Jalen Waddle has top 10 upside. I've got him here at 18, though, because I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1. And then at 19, Mike Evans, I just am in the spot where, listen, I get the player's great. I'm not debating the player. He's a Hall of Fame type of player for me personally. But with Mike Evans, I've been not shy about this one either. The Emeka Egbuka pick, it concerns me from a multitude of angles. Because when you look at this Emeka Egbuka pick, he was widely regarded as one of the most pro-ready, surefire, can't-miss types of talents in the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, obviously, he wasn't like a top 10 pick or anything like that, so nobody viewed him as a generational talent, but everybody was in consensus, NFL GMs, coaches, scouts, that this guy was ready to play right away. Why would they do that, right? If they were only going to have him as their wide receiver 3, why does it make sense? Unless you know that Mike Evans is slowing down. Unless you know that Chris Godwin is not going to be coming back from injury the same player, or maybe at all in 2025. There's something we don't know. And that's what makes me worried about Mike Evans, because he is at that age where at any point he can fall off. But of course, I'm not ranking Mike at his ceiling. I'm ranking him where I feel comfortable ranking him at 19. Obviously, he could be better than this, but I'm putting him here at 19, and I'm keeping him here for now. And then Davante Adams at 20 to round out this tier. Davante Adams also is at an age we can't trust. I do not trust Davante Adams to be much higher than this, but I will say this. He actually rose up in my rankings quite a bit because, like Mike, you just can't take anything from last year and point to that and say, yeah, he's going to decline this year. He looked elite. Like, he still looked elite. He was the wide receiver 1 for the majority of the season in New York. And this is a guy who is coming into an offense with a better quarterback with Matt Stafford and a better offensive line to develop time to get him on a lot of different routes that he realistically couldn't do last year with a bad offensive line guarding Aaron Rodgers. So this is a scenario. It's just a better offense in general. I think Davante Adams does have a top 15 ceiling this year potentially, but I obviously am going to prefer Puka Nacua as the better wide receiver by a long shot. So that's why I've got him here at 20 and not too terribly much higher than this in the future, I don't think. Dropping down to our next tier, Xavier Worthy at 21 and Zay Flowers at 22. Yeah, you heard that right. Xavier Worthy obviously has to move up because of the impending Rashee Rice suspension. Xavier Worthy will get more deep throws. That's already been discussed throughout the offseason by coaches and by Xavier Worthy, expecting him himself. They're also going to be forced to just get him involved in more types of routes and design plays while Rashee Rice is out. That's a fact. So what's going to happen here is Xavier Worthy will have a fast start to the year. Again, if he is suspended for 3 to 4 games, Xavier Worthy could potentially be a top 10 wide receiver in the month of September of 2025. It's entirely possible. But of course, when Rice comes back, that's when Worthy that doesn't lose importance to the offense, but he loses importance in fantasy because Rashee Rice is the number 1 X receiver who makes sense in a fundamental NFL offense, which the Chiefs will run. But of course, Worthy is still a great talent, and he's got the best quarterback in the league throwing to him, so he will be plenty involved in fantasy football. Zay Flowers at 22, again, I've been discussing it all offseason. And listen, let me start by saying this. I understand why people don't want Zay Flowers. I totally get the pessimism on Zay Flowers because we've seen what we've seen, and it's been the same for 2 years. But my thing with Zay, when I went through my breakout wide receiver criteria, he fitted to a T. It's a contract year for the guy, and that typically lines up with a breakout player. Now, I guess it's not technically a breakout year, like it's not the last year of his contract, but he could leapfrog the 5th-year option and get an early contract jump in this season. So that is possible for him. Number 2 is that Todd Monken has already this offseason several times said that, I need to get him the ball more. So there's going to be more of an emphasis to get Zay the ball. I like Zay Flowers to have a breakout season at 22 here. And then Courtland Sutton at 23 to round out this tier. Listen, the quarterback is great. I believe in Bo Nix. I think that with another offseason with Courtland Sutton, it's going to take a step up. Now, again, Courtland Sutton, a little concerning just because of the fact that he's at an age I don't love. He's not a great talent as far as running the whole route tree. And number 3 with Courtland Sutton is that he's kind of wanting a contract too. Now, he's at practice right now. From what I understand, he's been taking part of it. So it's not that big of a concern when it comes to if he's going to get injured at the start of the season. But with Courtland Sutton, I think he's a top 25 wide receiver, and that's a good price to get him at when you're looking at Underdog and all these other platforms that you're drafting on. Drop it down to our next tier. Ted McMillan at 24, Travis Hunter at 25. 2 rookies right here, 2 of the top wide receiver prospects in 2025 NFL draft. I think that Ted McMillan is just a guy who is with a quarterback I don't trust. Like, that's really what it comes down to with Ted. And again, Vegas doesn't have tons of trust in him based on their projections. Bryce Young is not projected to be one of the top 5 throwers in the NFL. I can just tell you that right now. There is definitely a reason why Ted McMillan is going to be this far down in my rankings because I don't trust Bryce Young being able to deliver the ball enough, period, to anybody, let alone Ted McMillan, who I wasn't that high on out of college. I think Ted is a little bit overrated, and I honestly do think this could be around his ceiling this year. And then with Travis Hunter right here, at 25, again, like I said earlier in the video, Travis Hunter will get targets. Now, is it going to be 100 targets? Is it going to be 70? Is it going to be 95? And again, the reason why is because they drafted this guy to be a wide receiver primarily. And the reality is that he's such an elite talent that he's going to make the best of what he gets. So if he gets 90 to 95 targets, he will be a top 30 guy because he will get in the end zone and he'll make a bunch of plays after the catch. His yards per route run this year are probably going to be nuts. So Travis Hunter, to me, top 25 guy, but obviously you can't take him as your top tier wide receiver. Now, 26 and 27, I've got Deebo Samuel and DJ Moore here. And again, Deebo Samuel I've been discussing all offseason as well. This is a personal target of mine. One of my most drafted players. And I'm not going to tell you it's because of metrics that I like. There is no metric that would back up Deebo Samuel having a rebound year. Nothing. But the point is that Deebo Samuel, I think there's a lot of good things on his side. Deebo Samuel coming into the year on a contract here. Wants to get paid again. Deebo Samuel coming into an offense with another creative mind, running the offense, calling the plays, designing the plays that is going to get him the ball like they did in San Francisco. They're not going to try to pigeonhole this guy as just a pure route runner. He will run routes, but he's also going to get the ball in a lot of short situations and on end arounds and stuff like that. Number 3 is that Deebo Samuel, the offseason issue with him being fat, the video that came out, I think it's hilarious because Deebo Samuel has always been a bigger bodied player. That's just how he's been built since he was a rookie. Like, this is not abnormal for Deebo Samuel to look this way. So I don't particularly find it compelling that he's out of shape or anything like that. I like to see him in action before I put him much lower than this because I really do think this could be a big bounce back year. And then with DJ Moore, I've just had a lot of issues with DJ Moore, and based on what we're seeing from Caleb Williams so far in training camp, this is a problem. Like, Caleb Williams does not look good running an actual, real, orchestrated NFL offense. He looks tight, he looks indecisive, and he just looks bad. So I just don't trust that DJ Moore is going to get the most out of his playing time like he didn't last year with Caleb Williams. And also, I've highlighted this too, Caleb Williams doesn't usually have massive wide receiver ones. Like, in college, he had one 1,000-yard wide receiver all of college. That's a great quarterback, not providing that much for one option. He's a spread it around type of guy. That's why I just don't think DJ Moore has much more upside than he realistically did last year. And then Jameson Williams at 28 to round us out in this tier. Jameson Williams, I do think is going to be a pop player this year. Similar to last year, I just think a little less consistent. Again, I highlighted this earlier in the video. I think that there will be less emphasis on the rest of the surrounding supporting cast, so to speak, in Detroit, because I just don't think John Morton will be able to fulfill Ben Johnson's shoes. I don't think that he will. So with Jameson Williams, there's obviously going to be incentive to get another contract. There's obviously going to be incentive for the guy to play really well, and he is a great talent. I'm just saying I don't particularly view him much higher than this right here, so I'm going to keep him at 28. And then dropping out to our last tier to round us out, Khalil Shakir and DK Metcalf. With Khalil Shakir, I ended up finally just going with what my gut was telling me, putting him inside the top 30, because I've been saying it all offseason. I do believe he finishes 12 spots or more above where he did last year. And he was the wide receiver 36 last year, so I needed to put my money where my mouth was on this one. Khalil Shakir, with the second best quarterback in the NFL, Josh Allen throwing him the ball, was the wide receiver 1 last year, and guess what? Keon Coleman, inconsistent so far this offseason. Dalton Kincaid, we know that's a 50-50 shot on whether he works. So you've got two 50-50 shot players, and like Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So Buffalo might want to make them their breakout players and take pressure off Khalil Shakir. But what happens when we get into week 6 and Khalil Shakir is the only one who has good hands? He's going to get force-fed the ball. So I've got him here at 29. And then DK Metcalf 30 to round us out. This is purely because he is going to get peppered with targets. They've got Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. That's what their receiving core is. Oh, yeah, and 35-year-old Robert Woods. Like, they have DK Metcalf, and then cross your fingers. DK Metcalf, I don't think, is as good of a talent, for example, as an A.J. Brown. He's obviously not in a better offense than A.J. Brown. 40-year-old quarterback Aaron Rodgers, bad offensive line, not particularly, by the way, a great jump ball catcher. So I just don't know if I see this one working out super well, but I've got to have him in here at 30 because he will get peppered with targets. So let me know what you think of the rankings in 2025 fantasy football. And if you are looking to get into one of those underdog drafts like I was talking about, and you want to see what the $1.5 million winner did last year draft strategy-wise, click on this video right here.